Welcome back to the Tidarium Hangar. Happy Friday, everybody. Today I want to revisit the scale discussion with a lot of new releases that are out, a lot of new figures and options that are going to be in our collections. How do they scale with everything else? And where are we with scale and what's coming up? I'm going to share my opinion, my thoughts about the whole scale situation, especially here in 2022 with all that's coming up. I'm not going to talk about every figure that was ever made. I'm actually just going to talk more about groups of figures and specific releases. We're going to talk about all of this coming up. So first off, I really want to say that when it comes to scale, it is an individual perspective. It is your own opinion or idea of what scales well with other figures, and that's just a fact. That's all there is to it. But it depends on what part of animation you watched and what episode to decide whether or not you think a particular figure scales well with another figure. So there's a possibility that you could have 1,000 fans with 1,000 different opinions of what scales with what properly. Enter the Sunbow chart, which sort of tries to put a scale to what's going on. But one thing I do want to point out is scale seems to be based on the bot. And then the alt mode doesn't usually scale very well. The real world size and scale of the vehicles don't match because the bot mode is where the emphasis of the matching occurs. So with all of this taken into account, G1 itself was terrible with scale. The G1 toys, the G1 cartoon was inaccurate. But at the end of the day, this is all about you. So we're going to start with Optimus Prime and Megatron, or you can have pretty much any of the Megatrons that are out there, or any of the Optimus Primes. They're in the 9-inch scale. I have taken 20 years to come to grips with the fact that we are now going to be in 9-inch scale. 4 days ago it hit me, 12 inches over, and we're all stuck with the 9-inch. These are closer to 10-inch, by the way, but the 9-inch scale idea is there, and 10, 12 is gone. So we won't talk anything about the 12-inch scale. Now, I do want to say that if you get the Magic Square Optimus Prime, or if you go off and you get maybe an X-Transbots or a DX9 version of Megatron, they're all really close to the same height, the same size scale. Some of them are a little chunkier than others, but overall, they all scale about the same. I want to talk about a couple things that Takara did right before I talk about some of the stuff that they've done wrong when it comes to scale. But most of Takara's figures scale well. But I want to point out that this Ironhide, although he's got the side skirts, and I think it's just not the best design, and we're going to see better Ironhides in the future, but looking at this, it scales, in my mind, perfectly. He's not as tall as Prime, but he's not too short. I think he scales pretty well. But then this is going to be an argument when we get into talking about these Carbots. I think their Shockwave is too short. In my mind, Shockwave is eye to eye with Megatron, not shorter, and maybe even a little taller. So the Takara one's too short, but looks fantastic, like almost perfect aesthetically. But then you've got like the Fans Toys one that is the right height, and you've got the Cloud9, which is really close to what I think the right height is. So those two beat the height, but Takara still wins the sculpt. The other thing that I think is an epic fail, scale-wise, this is me personally, Takara went too small in their sneakers. And yeah, it depends on what part of the animation you're watching or how you remember it, but I really think the Deformation Space or the DS version is so much better scaled, and the aesthetic of them look great. There's pluses and minuses to both of them, but just scale only, I just think Takara went too small. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do some things to fix that, prop one up, put them on different elevations, those kinds of things, but side by side with Megatron, too small in my opinion. So the other thing is they went too small in the Carbots. The Carbot sizes, in my opinion, are too small. I would like to see them a little bit taller, closer to Ironhide, just one head shorter than Ironhide, but not actually as tall as Ironhide. So that right there kind of opens up for a little bit of discussion what we'll see in the future. So I want to use this picture here to show that I think Fans Toys is perfectly nailing the scale and size of what I think a Carbot should be. And you see this, not that they've made Carbots just yet, but the fact that they've made their Stunticons this size and this scale. And if you look at the Stunticon, this drag strip is the right drag strip, not the left. The left is DX9, and there's arguments that DX9 is a little bit too tall, but I still would rather have my Carbots DX9 size than what Takara did, even though I like a lot of the designs with Takara. We need a new Sideswipe. But looking at this scale, I really think I'm excited about Fans Toys' scale of their figures. I mean, I like all their figures, but I think they scale a little bit better with their Carbots, and I look forward to those. Now we get into looking at Grimlock, and I've already talked about Seekers being a bit too small. Grimlock is too small from Takara, and so for that, that's kind of a problem. Let's show a better picture. So Chosen Prime had a pretty good picture of them side by side. So on I think the left, I think, is Grinder for Fans Toys. On the right is Takara's, which there is no universe that Grimlock is shorter than Optimus Prime. And this is from the same company putting out the wrong scale. For whatever reason, they did that. But at the end of the day, I think that Fans Toys and Gigapower both scale better than what Takara did with their Grimlock. And then the whole Dinobot set is fine. But the problem when you get into mixing and matching Fans Toys and Gigapower, you can mix and match some, but not all. But I have videos about that already. So I want to touch on the bugs real quick. Now, I did spend an entire week and basically reviewed every single bug made by every single company, but I really was just reviewing the Fans Toys that were out, but had a good comparison in there of all of them. And they're all about the same size. I'm give or take like a fraction of an inch. They're all pretty close to the same size. They all scale relatively well. The differences come into aesthetics and how well they clean up, but that's not what this is about. Getting into some mini-bots and conversation, just overall thoughts about mini-bots. I want to say that Bad Cube's done some pretty good mini-bots, relatively good, that still sort of hold up. But it comes down more to X-Transbots versus Fans Toys. And one thing where Fans Toys sort of wins in the mini-bots is they're a little bit bigger for the most part. Now, Neptune is bigger, so the Sea Spray and X-Transbots is a lot bigger. So it's kind of hit and miss and here and there. Picking and choosing, but I think you really can't go wrong with either X-Transbots or with Fans Toys. But Fans Toys is starting to go on the bigger end of mini bots, which I prefer, and they're almost as big as Carbots because I think Carbots should be bigger. So all of that's going to work out in the end, I believe. So when it comes down to the movie bots, just in general, I think that they all scale a little bit bigger than Season 1 and 2. And of course, Season 3 kind of getting lumped into all that stuff too. And I really think that there are two major players in this department, of course, Fans Toys and X-Transbots, and they all seem to scale well together. Whether you're putting a Hot Rod next to a Cup, whether you're putting a Cyclonus next to a Galvatron, you can swap them out. I think the new Galvatron coming from X-Transbots is actually going to scale almost exactly the same as Fans Toys. So all of them scale exactly the same, more or less. Will be interesting to see how this Ultra Magnus from X-Transbots turns out, but I believe it'll match Takara's Ultra Magnus. So again, I think that all of these movie bots more or less blend well together, scale well together. And what Takara's done, the couple of few they did, I think they're almost not even in the conversation anymore. Getting into some newer stuff, kind of like the new Blaster, the DSO-1, that scales very well. Also, the old KFC Transistor Blaster scales very well. It works for me, and I think that those scale well, very well. But how about with Robot Paradise? Yes, they scale with Robot Paradise. This DS Blaster has like adjustable hips, so you could adjust him down to be the almost exact height as the Robot Paradise or Fans Toys version of Soundwave. So that all looks pretty good to me also. So getting into combiners, I find there are two scales. I'm going to start with the smaller scale that I find MP scale. So 18-inch and about the 20-21 inch scale. I do not think that much smaller than that. When you start to get into 15-inch, just doesn't really feel like Masterpiece. What you see in the middle here is MMC and how their all-in-one 18-inch figure scales with Masterpiece. So looking at that, I think that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Pick and choose. It's really hard to mix, though, the 18 and the 21-inch scales. But when you get with this, on the left is the Jin Bao, I think they call it Gravity Build or something like that. But that is a KO oversize of Generation Toy. And then, of course, MMC, and on the right is Jin Bao KO oversize of Warbotron. So I've made a whole video about this. I'm not going to go into detail about every single combiner, but there's also the Combiner Wars version of, it's a Titan class version of Devastator, and then there's a Titan class version of Predaking from Hasbro / Takara, and those are all sort of in the 18-inch scale too. So those will kind of work if you're working in this scale. So I do want to note that MMC is already working on their Defensor, and they haven't really announced plans for the future, but it's a possibility that MMC will dial out every combiner in that scale, and if you're happy with that scale, then that would work. And of course, it looks good. I think there's nothing wrong with this. If the other companies weren't putting out 21-inch, I wouldn't be into the 21-inch scale, but they are. So that's kind of where my heart lies. But this still looks great, and it still scales very well. So when the 21-inch scale started coming about, I got excited. And then really the first one on the scene was Zeta. And Zeta made their Bruticus. Then when they started making their Superion, I got excited. And it was very affordable, very budget. And it uses parts forming, and mine is very solid. Now, some people say they've had problems with theirs, but mine is very solid. It stands there looking amazing. That's all I needed to do. But in around the 20 to 21 inch range. Now, they also made a Bruticus, and then you look at this, and that's kind of the new scale. Well, really, it was the Devastator from Toy World, but Zeta was part of Toy World, so all that kind of started this bigger scale, bigger size combiner. Now, X-Transbots on the right here stepped in, and they made their Minosaur, and DX9 made a Minosaur a little bit bigger than X-Transbots. Really, it's only like 1 inch bigger. And then on the left over there, you see the future. This is a digital render of what Fans Toys might look like when you put it together. So there's the Fans Toys. Now, they're supposed to be at the higher end, like over 21 inches, maybe 22 inches. So we'll find out. I mean, nobody really knows. Nobody on the planet really knows, except for Fans Toys, how big that thing's going to be. But the rumor on the street is it's going to be bigger than even Zeta's Bruticus. So with all of that, I still think all these companies, they blend well together. They scale well together. Even as small as X-Transbots turned out to be, we all thought it was going to be like way smaller, but just less than an inch, within an inch, is not that big of a deal. And actually, Supertron is actually like 20 point something inches tall. So with that, all these scale together very well, and so I'm excited about, well, pretty much any of the releases that they put out, and I'm in on X-Transbots Defensor. And we're also hearing that we should be finishing these up pretty soon, at least the Minosaur. And then hopefully we'll get the Superion from Fans Toys finished up soon, so we'll know more about that. But at the end of the day, this combiner situation is a big deal because there's so much money riding on it. How well will they combine it? Some people, in some cases, have bought 3 sets. They're waiting for 3 of that one figure to finish out those sets. So that's why the combiner thing is such a big deal, such a hot button. And I'm going to be talking about this once it's released. And of course, I'll make my video, but we'll also be talking about what's going to happen with Superion and all that kind of stuff coming up. So anyway, this is a quick, short scale video, just kind of discussing scale and how things have changed a bit. Some things that are still issues with our collection, and kind of the direction we're going. I do like bigger Carbots. Do you like bigger? Do you like the smaller Carbots? Do you think that we have a pretty good system for scale going on? What company do you think adheres to scale the best? Let me know in the comments below, and like and subscribe. Enjoy your Friday. Titanium Hanger out.